The fluorescent lights flickered ominously in the sterile corridors of Metropolitan General Hospital at 2:47 a.m. Maria Santos pushed her cleaning cart down the empty hallway, the squeaky wheel echoing through the silence like a metronome counting down to disaster. She had been working the night shift for 18 months, invisible to the doctors and nurses who rushed past her during their brief encounters. Tonight felt different. Tonight, the hospital felt like it was holding its breath. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The emergency alert system crackled to life, its harsh tone cutting through the quiet like a scalpel. Code Silver. All personnel to emergency stations. Code Silver. Maria's hands tightened on the cart's handle. Code Silver meant an internal security threat, but the specifics were never announced over the public address system. She had memorized every code, every protocol, every procedure during her time here. Most cleaning staff wouldn't know what code Silver meant, but Maria wasn't most cleaning staff. Dr. Jennifer Walsh burst through the doors of the cardiac wing, her usually immaculate appearance disheveled, her eyes wide with panic. She nearly collided with Maria's cart, barely acknowledging her presence as she fumbled with her phone. "Where is everyone?" she muttered, her voice cracking under pressure. "The entire system is down. We have 37 patients on life support, and the backup generators aren't responding to the main grid." Maria continued mopping, her movements steady and methodical, but her mind was racing. The hospital's power grid was more complex than most people realized. It wasn't just about keeping the lights on. Every ventilator, every heart monitor, every piece of life-sustaining equipment depended on a carefully orchestrated network of primary power, backup systems, and emergency protocols. If the backup generators weren't responding, something was fundamentally wrong with the hospital's infrastructure. "Ma'am," Maria said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Walsh turned, surprised that the cleaning woman had spoken. "The generators in the sub-basement. Have they been checked?" Dr. Walsh stared at her for a moment, as if seeing her for the first time. "The sub-basement? That's not your concern. Security will handle it." But there was uncertainty in her voice, a crack in the professional facade that suggested she wasn't entirely sure who was handling what. Maria nodded and returned to her cleaning, but her eyes tracked Dr. Walsh's movement down the corridor. Through the large windows overlooking the city, she could see the lights of other buildings flickering in an unusual pattern. This wasn't just about Metropolitan General. Something was affecting the entire medical district, and the timing was too precise to be coincidental. The elevator at the end of the hall dinged softly, and Chief of Staff Dr. Robert Harrison stepped out, his face grim. He was followed by two men in expensive suits who didn't belong in a hospital at 3 a.m. Maria had seen their type before, during her previous life. Corporate executives with government connections, the kind of people who appeared during crises that weren't supposed to exist. "The situation is contained," one of the suits was saying as they walked past Maria's position. "The media won't get wind of this if we handle it correctly. The power grid failures can be attributed to routine maintenance that went wrong." Dr. Harrison's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Routine maintenance? We have patients dying up. There, the dialysis unit is completely offline, and the premature babies in the NICU are on manual ventilation. You're talking about covering this up while people are literally fighting for their lives." Maria's hands moved automatically, wiping down surfaces that didn't need cleaning, but her attention was focused entirely on the conversation. The second suit, a woman with silver hair and cold eyes, spoke with the kind of authority that came from years of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. "Dr. Harrison, you need to understand the bigger picture. This isn't just about your hospital. We're dealing with a coordinated attack on the medical infrastructure of 7 major cities. If the public realizes that our hospitals are vulnerable to this kind of cyber warfare, it will cause mass panic. People will avoid seeking medical care, and the resulting deaths will far exceed anything we're dealing with tonight. Cyber warfare. The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She had spent 3 years studying exactly this kind of threat, back when she worked for the Department of Homeland Security's Critical Infrastructure Protection Division. Before she had to disappear, before she had to become invisible, the group moved toward the administrative offices, their voices fading but not their urgency. Maria abandoned her cart and walked quickly to the nearest computer terminal, one of the public access stations used by families to check on patients. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, accessing diagnostic systems that most people didn't know existed. The hospital's network architecture spread across her screen like a digital map of vulnerabilities. Someone had inserted malicious code into the power management system, but it wasn't a simple attack. This was sophisticated, surgical, designed to cause maximum disruption while leaving minimal digital fingerprints. The kind of attack that required inside knowledge of hospital systems and months of preparation. Maria's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Still think you can hide in plain sight? The patients in room 237 have 12 minutes of oxygen left. Choose wisely. Room 237, the pediatric intensive care unit. Maria's blood turned to ice as she realized that whoever was behind this attack knew exactly who she was and where she worked. They had been watching her, waiting for the right moment to force her out of hiding. She ran toward the elevator, her cleaning supplies forgotten. The PICU was on the 4th floor, and if the elevators were affected by the power grid failure, she would have to take the stairs. As she reached the elevator bank, the doors opened to reveal a man in a hospital security uniform she didn't recognize. He was tall, athletic, with the kind of controlled movements that suggested military training. "Ma'am, I need to ask you to return to your assigned area," he said, his voice polite but firm. "The hospital is under security lockdown." Maria looked at his badge, James Mitchell, security supervisor. She had memorized every face in the hospital security department during her first month on the job. James Mitchell didn't exist until tonight. "I need to check on the cleaning supplies in the PICU," she said, maintaining her role even as her mind calculated escape routes and defensive positions. Some of the nurses called down about spills that need immediate attention. Mitchell's eyes were cold and assessing. "I'll escort you." It wasn't a request. They rode the elevator in silence. Maria's reflection in the polished steel doors, showing a tired woman in scrubs with calloused hands and tired eyes. But her reflection was lying. Dr. Maria Santos had 3 degrees from MIT, including a PhD in computer science with a specialization in cybersecurity. She had spent 5 years developing defensive protocols for critical infrastructure before discovering that her own government was using her work to target civilian populations in other countries. The elevator opened on the 4th floor, and Maria immediately heard what she had been dreading: the steady alarm of life support systems running on battery power. The backup generators weren't just offline. They had been actively sabotaged. The hallway was filled with nurses manually ventilating premature infants, their movements precise but desperate. "How long can they keep this up?" Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mitchell's expression didn't change. Long enough, but Maria knew better. Manual ventilation was exhausting work, and the nurses had been at it for at least 20 minutes already. Human error was inevitable, and when it came to premature infants, even a few seconds of inadequate oxygen could cause permanent brain damage or death. Her phone buzzed again. This time the message was longer. "The hospital's main server is located in the basement level B3. The malware controlling the power grid can be neutralized, but only by someone with your specific expertise. You have 9 minutes before the first patient dies. Security cameras are offline for the next 3 minutes. Choose quickly." Maria looked at Mitchell, who was watching her with the kind of focused attention that suggested he knew exactly what. She was thinking. "I need to use the restroom," she said. "I'll wait outside." The women's restroom was empty, its fluorescent lights flickering intermittently. Maria locked the door and immediately began stripping off her cleaning uniform to reveal the lightweight tactical clothing she wore underneath. Old habits died hard, and she had learned never to be completely defenseless. Even when hiding in plain sight, she climbed onto the toilet seat and pushed up one of the ceiling tiles, revealing a maintenance crawl space that connected to the hospital's ventilation system. During her first month on the job, she had memorized every maintenance tunnel, every service corridor, every emergency exit. If she was going to live as a ghost, she needed to know every way in and out of her environment. The crawl space was cramped and filled with dust, but it would take her directly to the basement levels without going through the main corridors. As she crawled through the narrow space, Maria's mind raced through the implications of what was happening. This wasn't just a cyber attack on Metropolitan General. Someone had orchestrated a coordinated assault on multiple hospitals, specifically to flush her out of hiding. But who knew where she was? And more importantly, what did they want? The ventilation shaft opened into a storage room on the first basement level. Maria dropped down silently, her feet landing on concrete that was cold even through her shoes. The basement levels of Metropolitan General were a maze of storage rooms, maintenance areas, and mechanical systems that kept the hospital functioning. Most of the staff never ventured down here, and the few who did followed clearly marked paths between specific destinations. Maria knew every inch of these levels. She moved through the corridors with practiced stealth, avoiding the main pathways, and staying close to the walls where shadows were deepest. The deeper she went, the more obvious it became that this was more than a simple power grid failure. Equipment that should have been humming with activity was silent, and the emergency lighting that should have illuminated every corridor was functioning in some areas but not others. Someone had been down here recently, someone who knew exactly which systems to disable and which to leave functional. Level B3 was different from the others. While the upper basement levels were utilitarian but clean, B3 felt forgotten, as if it existed in a different era of the hospital's history. The walls were older, the lighting was dimmer, and the air had a stale quality that suggested minimal ventilation, but Maria knew that appearances were deceiving. Some of the hospital's most critical systems were housed in this seemingly abandoned area. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The main server room was behind a door marked Authorized Personnel Only, but Maria had obtained authorized access during her 3rd week on the job. Not through official channels, but through the kind of careful observation and social engineering that had kept her alive for the past 3 years. She swiped her cleaning staff ID card, expecting it to be rejected. Instead, the lock clicked open with a soft electronic chirp. Someone wanted her to have access to this room. The server room was a cathedral of technology, rows of black towers humming with the digital heartbeat of the hospital's entire operation. Patient records, diagnostic systems, life support protocols, medication dispensaries, everything that kept Metropolitan General functioning was controlled from this room. And somewhere in these machines was the malware that was slowly killing patients 4 floors above. Maria approached the main terminal and logged in using administrative credentials she had memorized months ago. The screen flickered to life, revealing a network architecture that was both familiar and wrong. Someone had been inside the system for weeks, maybe months, carefully mapping every vulnerability and preparing for this moment. The malware was elegant in its simplicity. It masqueraded as a routine system update, But its true purpose was to create cascading failures throughout the hospital's infrastructure. Power grids, life support systems, medication dispensaries, even the elevators, everything could be controlled by whoever had inserted this code. But as Maria began to trace the malware's origins, she realized something that made her blood run cold. This wasn't just about the hospital. The code contained references to other medical facilities, other cities, other targets. Metropolitan General was just the beginning of something much larger. Her phone buzzed with another message. Impressive work, Dr. Santos, but you're only seeing the first movement of a much larger symphony. The question is, are you ready to conduct the rest? Maria's hands froze on the keyboard. Dr. Santos. They knew her real name, her real identity, the life she had been forced to abandon. But more than that, they knew she was the only person who could stop what was happening. The question was whether she was ready to stop being invisible. The server room door opened behind her, and Maria spun around to see Mitchell standing in the doorway, no longer pretending to be hospital security. In his hand was a tablet displaying what appeared to be a video feed from the PICU, where nurses were still manually ventilating premature infants. Dr. Maria Santos, he said, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and threat. Former senior analyst with the Department of Homeland Security's Critical Infrastructure Protection Division. Expert in cybersecurity, network architecture, and defensive protocols. Currently wanted by 3 government agencies for unauthorized access to classified systems. Maria's mind raced through her options. The server room had only one exit, and Mitchell was blocking it. But the room's ventilation system connected to the same network of tunnels she had used to reach this level. You have a choice, Mitchell continued. You can try to run, like you've been running for 3 years. You can attempt to disable the malware and save the patients upstairs. Or you can listen to what we're really offering. What are you offering? Maria asked, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Mitchell smiled, and for the first time, his expression seemed genuine. The chance to stop hiding. The chance to use your skills for something that matters. The chance to prevent a disaster that will make tonight look like a practice run. Maria looked at the server screen, where lines of malicious code were still executing their deadly program. Upstairs, patients were dying. In other cities, other hospitals were facing the same crisis. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was orchestrating it all. The patients upstairs, she said. They're innocent. Whatever this is about, they don't deserve to die. No, Mitchell agreed, they don't. So the question is, are you ready to stop being a janitor and start being a hero? Maria's fingers moved to the keyboard, but instead of typing, she looked directly at Mitchell. Who are you working for? Mitchell's smile widened. The same people who want to give you back your life, Dr. Santos. The same people who need your expertise to stop what's coming. The same people who know that the attack on these hospitals is just the beginning. Beginning of what? The end of everything you've been trying to protect. The lights in the server room flickered, and Maria realized that her time was running out. Whatever choice she made in the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of the patients upstairs, but the direction of the rest of her life. She looked at the screen one more time, at the malware that was slowly killing innocent people, and made her decision. Her fingers began to fly across the keyboard. Maria's fingers danced across the keyboard with the fluid precision of a concert pianist. Each keystroke deliberate and purposeful. The malware's code structure unfolded before her like a familiar language she had once spoken fluently. Within 30 seconds, she had identified the primary attack vectors and begun constructing countermeasures that would neutralize the immediate threat to the life support systems. Mitchell watched her work with the kind of focused attention that suggested he understood exactly what he was witnessing. Impressive, he said quietly. Most cybersecurity specialists would need an hour just to map the network architecture. You've already identified the core vulnerabilities. Maria's hands never paused in their work. The malware is using a modified version of the Stuxnet framework, but it's been adapted for medical systems rather than industrial control networks. Whoever designed this has intimate knowledge of both hospital infrastructure and advanced persistent threat methodologies. She typed a series of commands that began systematically isolating and quarantining the malicious code. This isn't the work of script kiddies or even conventional cybercriminals. This is nation-state level sophistication. The server room's ventilation system hummed to life as Maria's countermeasures took effect. On the screen, she could see the hospital's power grid beginning to stabilize, backup generators coming online in sequence, and life support systems transitioning from battery power to main electrical supply. But her expression remained grim. "The immediate crisis is contained," she said, still typing. "But this malware has been dormant in the system for months. It's been learning, adapting, and preparing for this moment. Even if I remove every trace of the current attack, the vulnerability it exploited will remain." Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Which brings us to the real question, Dr. Santos. Are you ready to learn why someone wanted to force you out of hiding?" Maria finally stopped typing and turned to face him fully. 3 years ago, I discovered that Project Nightfall, the defensive cybersecurity system I had spent 2 years developing, was being weaponized by a Black Ops division within the NSA. Instead of protecting American infrastructure, they were using my work to target civilian populations in allied countries. When I tried to expose the program, I was framed for treason and forced to disappear. "We know," Mitchell said simply. "We also know that the evidence you gathered before going underground was correct. Project Nightfall has been used to destabilize governments, manipulate elections, and create humanitarian crises in 7 countries. Over the past 3 years, the program has grown far beyond its original scope." Maria's eyes narrowed. "And you're telling me this because Project Nightfall is about to be used against American targets. The same people who forced you into hiding are now planning to use your own creation to cripple the infrastructure of major American cities. Hospitals, power grids, water treatment facilities, transportation networks, everything that keeps modern society functioning." The implications hit Maria like a physical blow. They're planning to blame it on foreign actors. Create a false flag operation that justifies military action against whatever country they want to target. Mitchell's expression was grave. "Not just military action. They're planning to use the chaos to implement martial law, suspend constitutional rights, and establish a permanent surveillance state. The attack on these hospitals tonight was just a field test, a way to verify that their modified version of your defensive protocols could be turned into weapons of mass destruction." Maria felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders, like a lead blanket. "How do you know all this? Who are you working for?" "I work for a group of intelligence professionals who believe that our government has forgotten the difference between protecting America and controlling America. We've been monitoring Project Nightfall for 2 years, gathering evidence and building a case. But we need someone who understands the technical aspects of the system, someone who can testify about its original purpose and how it's been corrupted. You need me to come out of hiding and become a target. We need you to help us stop something that will make tonight look like a practice run." Maria walked to the bank of servers, her hand resting on one of the humming towers. These machines process the medical data for 3 million people. Every heartbeat, every breath, every medication dosage, it all flows through systems that are now vulnerable to attack. If Project Nightfall is deployed against civilian infrastructure, the casualties won't be measured in hundreds or thousands. They'll be measured in millions. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Maria, read." It, her face growing pale. "They're accelerating the timeline. The next phase of the operation is scheduled to begin in 14 hours. Mitchell stepped closer. What's the target? The Eastern Seaboard power grid. They're planning to create cascading failures that will black out everything from Boston to Washington, D.C. But that's not the worst part. Maria's voice was barely above a whisper. The attack will be designed to look like it originated from servers in Beijing. They want to start a shooting war with China. The server room fell silent except for the steady hum of electronic equipment. Mitchell's face was grim as he processed the implications. How many people would die in a coordinated blackout of that magnitude? In the first 72 hours, probably 50,000. Hospitals without power, traffic control systems offline. Emergency services crippled. But if it actually triggers a military conflict with China, the casualties could be in the millions. Maria's hands moved across the keyboard again, this time accessing encrypted files she had hidden in the hospitals. System months ago. I've been tracking unusual network activity for the past 6 months. I thought it was just routine corporate espionage, but now I see the pattern. Someone has been systematically mapping the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure across the entire country. The files displayed on the screen showed a complex web of interconnected systems, power grids, water treatment facilities, hospitals, financial networks, transportation hubs. Each system had been carefully analyzed, its weaknesses cataloged, its defenses mapped. It was a blueprint for the systematic destruction of American society. This is what they've been building toward, Maria said, her voice filled with a mixture of admiration and horror. They're not just planning to attack individual targets. They're planning to attack the connections between targets, the interdependencies that hold our entire civilization together. Mitchell studied the data with the medulla, kind of focused attention that suggested military training. How long would it take to recover from an attack like this? Months, maybe years. The psychological trauma alone would reshape American society. People would demand security at any cost, even if it meant surrendering their freedom. It would be the end of the Republic as we know it. Maria's phone rang, the sound sharp and urgent in the confined space. She looked at the display and saw a number she hadn't seen in 3 years. It's my former supervisor at DHS, Dr. Elizabeth Chun. Answer it, Mitchell said, but keep it on speaker. Maria pressed the answer button. Dr. Chun, I thought you were dead. Maria, thank God. I need you to listen very carefully. Project Nightfall has been compromised. Someone is planning to use your defensive protocols as weapons against American targets. I'm sending you encrypted coordinates. You need to get to that location immediately. Dr. Chun, I'm with someone who claims to be working to stop the same thing. Can you verify? Maria, trust no one. The conspiracy reaches into the highest levels of government. The person you're with right now may be working for the same people who want to destroy everything you've tried to protect. Maria looked at Mitchell, who was listening with an expression of growing concern. Dr. Chun, how do I know you're really who you claim to be? How do I know this isn't another trap? Because I have something that only the real Dr. Chun would have. The line was silent for a moment. Then Chun's voice continued with a phrase that made Maria's blood run cold. The ghost in the machine remembers everything. It was a code phrase from Maria's original research, something she had shared with only one person during her time at DHS. If Dr. Chun was alive and using that phrase, it meant that Maria's worst fears were about to be realized. The coordinates I'm sending you lead to a secure facility where we can plan our response. But Maria, you need to understand something. The attack on the hospitals tonight wasn't just a field test. It was a recruitment operation. They wanted to force you out of hiding so they could either recruit you or eliminate you. Mitchell stepped forward. Dr. Santos, I need you to consider the possibility that Dr. Chun is not who she claims to be. Voice synthesis technology has advanced considerably in the past 3 years. Maria's mind raced through the implications. If Dr. Chun was alive, It meant that the evidence Maria had gathered 3 years ago might not be complete. If Dr. Chun was dead and someone was impersonating her, it meant that the conspiracy was even more sophisticated than she had imagined. "Dr. Chun," Maria said carefully, "I need you to verify something that only you would know. What was the name of the algorithm I developed for identifying anomalous network traffic patterns?" "The Sentinel Protocol. You named it after your childhood dog." Maria's heart sank. She had never told Dr. Chun about the algorithm's name, and she had never owned a dog. Someone was playing an elaborate game of deception, and Maria was trapped in the middle of it. "Mitchell," she said quietly, "I think we need to leave now." But Mitchell was already moving toward the door, his hand reaching inside his jacket. "Dr. Santos, I need you to step away from the computer terminal." "Why?" "Because you've just confirmed something we've suspected for months. The person calling herself Dr. Chin is actually Dr. Sarah Liu, a former NSA analyst who's been working with the Project Nightfall team. She's been tracking you for months, waiting for the right moment to either recruit you or eliminate you." Maria's hands moved instinctively toward the keyboard, but Mitchell was faster. "Please don't make this difficult. We're trying to save your life." "How do I know you're not working for the same people?" Mitchell smiled grimly. "Because if I were working for them, you'd already be dead. The real question is, are you ready to trust someone, or are you going to keep running until there's nowhere left to hide?" Maria looked at the server screen, where the hospital systems were humming normally after her intervention. She thought about the patients upstairs, the nurses who had worked through the night to keep people alive, the quiet heroism of medical professionals who faced crisis with competence and compassion. "If I help you," she said, "what happens to my life? What happens to the person I've become?" Maria Santos, the night shift cleaner, disappears forever. Dr. Maria Santos, the cybersecurity expert who helped prevent the collapse of American society, gets to help build something better. Maria's phone buzzed with another message, this one from a different number. "The facility Dr. Chun mentioned is compromised. If you go there, you'll be walking into a trap. But there's another option. Check your old research files. Look for references to Project Mirror. The answer has been there all along." Project Mirror. Maria's blood turned to ice as she remembered the classified research she had conducted during her final months at DHS. It had been a theoretical exercise, a way to understand how defensive systems could be turned into offensive weapons. She had never imagined that someone would actually implement her theoretical framework. "Mitchell," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I think I know what they're really planning. And it's worse than either of us imagined. Tell me." Project Mirror wasn't just about turning defensive systems into weapons. It was about creating a feedback loop that would make the weapons appear to be defending against themselves. The attacks on American infrastructure will be designed to look like they're being stopped by American defensive systems, but the defensive systems will actually be causing the attacks. Mitchell's face went pale. "That's impossible." "The technical complexity alone. I designed the theoretical framework. It's not only possible, it's elegant. The American people will see their government heroically defending against foreign attacks. But the government will actually be attacking its own citizens. It's the perfect false flag operation, because the flags will be real." Maria turned back to the computer terminal and began typing with renewed urgency. "I need to access my old research files. If I can find the original Project Mirror specifications, I might be able to identify the vulnerabilities in their implementation. Maria, we don't have time for this. Every minute we stay here increases the risk of discovery. Then we make time." Maria's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing encrypted files she had hidden in dozens of different systems over the past 3 years. "I've been preparing for this moment without realizing it. Every system I've cleaned, every network I've maintained, every security protocol I've observed, It's all been building toward this. The screen filled with technical specifications, network diagrams, and algorithmic frameworks that represented 3 years of careful observation and analysis. Maria had been hiding in plain sight, but she had also been studying, learning, and preparing for the moment when she would need to use her skills to save lives. "Here," she said, pointing to a section of code on the screen. "This is the vulnerability. Project Mirror relies on a centralized command and control system that coordinates all the false flag operations. If we can identify and compromise that system, we can turn their own weapons against them." Mitchell studied the display with growing understanding. How long would it take to implement a countermeasure? Hours, maybe days. But we'd need access to systems that are heavily protected, and we'd need to work without being detected by some of the most sophisticated surveillance apparatus in the world. Can it be done? Maria looked at the screen, at the lines of code that represented both her greatest achievement and her most dangerous creation. Yes, but not from here. We need to get to the source. Where? The same place where I created Project Nightfall 3 years ago. The NSA's Advanced Cyber Operations Center in Fort Meade. We need to break into one of the most secure facilities in the world and reprogram the system. I designed to protect America so that it actually protects America. Mitchell's expression was grim. That's suicide. No, Maria said, gathering her equipment and preparing to leave the server room. That's justice. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Maria took one last look at the servers that had been her responsibility for the past 18 months. She had kept them running, maintained their security, and protected the data that kept patients alive. Now she was about to leave that simple, honest work behind and return to a world of shadows and deception. But sometimes, she realized the most important work happened in the shadows. Her phone buzzed with a final message. "Dr. Santos, the game is about to begin. The question is, which side will you choose when the shooting starts?" Maria deleted the message and followed Mitchell toward the exit. The shooting hadn't started yet, but she knew it was coming. The only question was whether she would be ready when it did. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Baltimore looked like 1,000 other forgotten industrial buildings, its broken windows and rusted exterior hiding the sophisticated operations center that Mitchell had led Maria to. Inside, banks of computer screens cast an eerie blue glow across a dozen workstations where analysts tracked data streams from around the world. Maria recognized the setup immediately. It was a mirror image of the facility she had worked in during her time at DHS, but without the government oversight and bureaucratic constraints. "Welcome to the Prometheus Group," Mitchell said as they entered through a reinforced steel door. "We're what you might call a private intelligence organization, staffed entirely by former government analysts who grew uncomfortable with the direction our agencies were taking." Maria surveyed the operation with a mixture of admiration and suspicion. How many people know about this facility? 17 core members, plus support staff who are compartmentalized to specific functions. Everyone here has been personally vetted by at least 3 other members, and we've been operating for almost 4 years without a single security breach. A woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes approached them from one of the workstations. Maria recognized her immediately, Dr. Rachel Morrison, former deputy director of the NSA's cybersecurity division, supposedly killed in a car accident 2 years ago. "Dr. Santos," Morrison said, extending her hand. "I've been following your work for quite some time. That power grid stabilization you performed at the hospital tonight was elegant work." Maria shook her hand cautiously. "Dr. Morrison, I attended your memorial service, a necessary fiction. The same people who forced you into hiding tried to have me eliminated when I started asking too many questions about Project Nightfall. Fortunately, I had friends who were willing to fake my death and bring me here." Morrison led them to a conference table surrounded by multiple screens displaying real-time data feeds. Before we go any further, I need to show you something that will change how you think about everything that's happened over the past 3 years. The central screen flickered to life, showing a complex organizational chart with hundreds of names, faces, and connections. At the center was a photograph of a man Maria had never seen before. Elderly, distinguished, with the kind of confident bearing that suggested a lifetime of wielding power. Dr. Marcus Blackwood, Morrison said. Former Secretary of Defense, current chairman of the board of Blackwood Industries, and the architect of what we call the infrastructure wars. Maria studied the chart, tracing the connections between government officials, defense contractors, and intelligence agencies. I've never heard of him. That's by design. Blackwood has spent the past decade building a network of influence that spans multiple administrations, both political parties, and dozens of private corporations. His goal isn't just profit, it's the fundamental restructuring of American society. Mitchell activated another screen, showing financial records and CORPO documents. Blackwood Industries has been quietly acquiring companies that control critical infrastructure. Power utilities, water treatment facilities, telecommunications networks, even medical supply chains. On paper, these are separate companies operating in different markets. In reality, they're all controlled by a single organization. A monopoly, Maria said, understanding beginning to dawn. More than that. A monopoly with the power to hold the entire country hostage. But Blackwood needed a way to justify the level of control he was seeking. That's where Project Nightfall comes in. Morrison pulled up another set of documents, these ones bearing the classified stamps that Maria remembered from her time at DHS. Your original defensive system was brilliant, Dr. Santos. It could identify and neutralize cyber threats faster than any human analyst. But Blackwood saw something else in your work, the perfect tool for creating the threats it was designed to stop. Maria felt the blood drain from her face. He's been using my own creation to attack American infrastructure, then using the same system to appear to defend against the attacks. Worse than that, he's been using the attacks to justify emergency powers that allow his companies to take control of the infrastructure they're supposedly protecting. Each crisis creates new opportunities for consolidation, new justifications for surveillance, new reasons why the government needs to work more closely with private contractors. The implications crashed over Maria like a tidal wave. How many attacks has he orchestrated? 47 major incidents over the past 3 years. The power grid failures in Texas, the water contamination in Flint, the hospital system crashes in Seattle. All of them were designed to create crises that his companies could solve. Maria walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that twinkled in the distance. Each light represented thousands of people who had no idea how vulnerable they were, how their basic services were being weaponized against them. There's something else, Morrison said quietly. Something personal. Maria turned back to the group. What do you mean? Dr. Elizabeth Chun, your former supervisor at DHS. She wasn't killed in the lab accident that supposedly took her life. She was recruited by Blackwood's organization and has been working to improve Project Nightfall ever since. The betrayal hit Maria like a physical blow. Elizabeth recruited me to DHS in the first place. She was my mentor, my friend. She was also reporting on your work to Blackwood's people from the beginning. The reason you were able to develop Project Nightfall so quickly wasn't just your genius. It was because Chun was feeding you information from other classified projects, allowing you to build on work that had been done in secret for years. Mitchell activated another screen, showing surveillance footage of a woman Maria recognized immediately. Elizabeth Chen, very much alive, entering a building in downtown Washington, D.C. This was taken yesterday, Mitchell said. Shun has been living under the identity of Dr. Sarah Liu. working as a senior analyst for Blackwood Industries' cybersecurity division. She's been using your friendship, your trust, to track your movements and anticipate your responses. Maria felt the foundation of her world shifting beneath her feet. She knew I was at the hospital. She's known where you were for months. The attack tonight wasn't just a field test. It was a recruitment operation designed specifically to force you out of hiding. Chun knew that you wouldn't be able to resist helping when lives were at stake. The conference room fell silent as Maria processed the full scope of the betrayal. The woman who had been her mentor, her friend, her inspiration to enter government service, had been manipulating her for years. Why? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would she do this? Morrison's expression was grim. Because she believes in Blackwood's vision of the future. A society where security is more important than freedom, where efficiency is more important than democracy, where the chaos of self-governance is replaced by the order of technocratic control. It's not just about money, Mitchell added. It's about ideology. Shun genuinely believes that American society is too chaotic, too inefficient, too vulnerable to survive in the modern world. She thinks that Blackwood's system of centralized control is the only way to protect the country from external threats. Maria thought about the conversation she had had with Chun during their time at DHS, the late-night discussions about the future of cybersecurity, the growing threats from foreign powers, the need for more aggressive defensive measures. She had thought they were theoretical discussions between colleagues. Now she realized they had been ideological recruitment sessions. What's the endgame? Maria asked. What does Blackwood ultimately want? Morrison activated a final screen, showing a timeline that stretched into the future. Phase 1 was the consolidation of infrastructure control, completed. Phase 2 is the creation of a national crisis that justifies emergency powers, beginning in 10 hours. Phase 3 is the implementation of a permanent security state with Blackwood Industries as the primary contractor for all essential services. What happens in 10 hours? The Eastern Seaboard attack you identified earlier. But it's not just about the power grid. Blackwood is planning to simultaneously attack water treatment facilities, telecommunications networks, and transportation systems across 17 major cities. The coordinated failures will create a cascade of emergencies that will overwhelm government response capabilities. Mitchell pointed to specific data points on the timeline. The attacks will be designed to look like they're coming from Chinese military hackers, but they'll actually be executed using modified versions of your Project Nightfall algorithms. The government will have no choice but to declare martial law and grant emergency powers to private contractors who can restore essential services. Blackwood's contractors, Maria said, understanding the full scope of the plan. Exactly. By the time the immediate crisis is resolved, Blackwood Industries will control the infrastructure of every major American city. The transition from emergency measures to permanent policy will be gradual, but irreversible. Maria looked at the organizational chart again, this time focusing on the government officials who were listed as part of Blackwood's network. How many people in the government are involved? 73 members of Congress, 4 cabinet secretaries, and at least 12 senior officials in the intelligence community. But most of them don't know the full scope of the plan. They think they're participating in legitimate national security initiatives. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Maria had spent 3 years thinking she was running from a small group of corrupt officials, but she had actually been hiding from a shadow organization that had infiltrated the highest levels of government. There's something else you need to know, Morrison said, her voice carrying a note of personal pain. Your disappearance 3 years ago wasn't just because you discovered the truth about Project Nightfall. It was because Chun reported to Blackwood that you were becoming suspicious of the program's true purpose. She set me up. Worse than that. She falsified evidence to make it look like you were working for foreign intelligence services. The treason. Charges against you aren't just bureaucratic harassment, they're part of a deliberate campaign to discredit you and prevent you from exposing the truth. Maria felt a surge of anger unlike anything she had experienced in years. She destroyed my life to protect a conspiracy that's designed to destroy American democracy. Yes, but she also made a mistake. In her reports to Blackwood, she underestimated your capabilities and overestimated her ability to control you. She thought that 3 years of hiding would make you more compliant, more willing to accept their offer of rehabilitation in exchange for cooperation. Mitchell leaned forward. Instead, you used those 3 years to study and prepare. You know more about infrastructure vulnerabilities than anyone in government, and you've developed countermeasures that even Blackwood's people haven't anticipated. What kind of countermeasures? The modifications you made to the hospitals. Systems tonight weren't just about stopping the immediate attack. You also installed monitoring software that's been quietly mapping the attack signatures back to their source. We've been tracking the data, and we think we've identified the location of Blackwood's primary command center. Maria's eyes widened. Where? Morrison smiled for the first time since they had arrived. A facility disguised as a corporate data center in Northern Virginia. It's less than 50 miles from NSA headquarters, hidden in plain sight among dozens of other technology companies. How do we get inside? That's the beautiful part. According to our intelligence, the facility is scheduled to receive a routine maintenance visit tomorrow morning. The maintenance crew will be performing updates to the building's security systems. Maria understood immediately. You want me to infiltrate the facility posing as a maintenance worker. Not just any maintenance worker. A cybersecurity specialist conducting routine updates to the building's network infrastructure. It's the perfect cover for accessing their systems without triggering their security protocols. And once I'm inside, you do what you do best. You find the vulnerabilities in their system and exploit them. But this time, instead of defending against an attack, you'll be launching one. Maria looked around the room at the faces of people who had sacrificed their careers, their identities, their lives to fight against a conspiracy that threatened the foundation of American society. How many people know about this operation? Just the people in this room, Morrison said. If the mission fails, if you're captured or killed, the rest of the Prometheus group will continue the fight. But you're our best chance of stopping Blackwood before he can implement Phase 3. Maria's phone buzzed with an encrypted message. She read it, her face growing pale. Chun knows I'm here. She sent a message offering to meet face-to-face to discuss terms for my return to government service. It's a trap, Mitchell said immediately. Of course it's a trap. But it's also an opportunity. If I can get close to Chun, I might be able to learn details about the attack that we haven't discovered yet. Morrison shook her head. Too risky. We have enough intelligence to proceed with the infiltration mission, do we? Because according to this message, the timeline has been accelerated. The attack is now scheduled to begin in 6 hours, not 10. If we're going to stop it, we need to move fast. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. 6 hours wasn't enough time to properly plan and execute an infiltration mission. But it might be enough time for Maria to attend a meeting with her former mentor and gather the intelligence they needed. There's something else, Maria said, reading the rest of the message. Chun says she has information about my family. About people I thought were dead. Morrison's expression was grim. What kind of information? She's not specific, but she says that my parents' death in that car accident 5 years ago wasn't an accident. She says she can prove who was really responsible and why they were killed. The personal stakes had suddenly become much higher. Maria had spent 5 years believing that her parents' death was a random tragedy, an accident that had motivated her to work harder, to serve her country more effectively. If Chun was telling the truth, if her parents had been murdered, then the conspiracy was even more personal than she had realized. "It's manipulation," Mitchell said. "She's using your grief against you. Maybe. But what if she's telling the truth? What if my parents were killed because of something I was working on, something I discovered without realizing it?" Maria looked at the screen showing Chun's photograph, her former mentor's face smiling back at her with the kind of warmth that had once made her feel safe and supported. Now that same smile looked predatory, calculating, dangerous. "I'm going to meet with her," Maria decided. "But not on her terms. I'm going to choose the location, the time, and the conditions. If she wants to recruit me, she's going to have to work for it." Morrison stood up. "Maria, this is exactly what they want. They want you to feel isolated, desperate, willing to take risks that you wouldn't normally consider. Then we give them what they want," Maria said, her voice carrying a new note of determination. "But we make sure they regret asking for it." She turned to Mitchell. "How quickly can you set up surveillance on a location of my choosing?" "Depends on the location." "Why?" "Because I'm going to meet with Dr. Elizabeth Chun, and I'm going to find out exactly what she knows about my parents' death. But I'm also going to make sure that when she tries to trap me, she ends up trapped herself." The game was about to begin, and Maria was ready to play by her own rules. The National Cathedral at dawn was a monument to permanence in a city built on the shifting sands of political power. Maria chose it as the meeting location precisely because of its symbolism, a place where truth was supposed to matter more than expediency, where moral authority transcended political calculation. She arrived 30 minutes early, dressed in the conservative business attire that Mitchell's team had provided, her appearance transformed from night shift cleaner to cybersecurity consultant. The cathedral's Gothic architecture cast long shadows across the stone floor as Maria positioned herself in a pew with clear sight lines to all entrances. Hidden in her jacket was a recording device no larger than a button, its signal being monitored by Morrison's team from a van parked 3 blocks away. Every word of her conversation with Chun would be captured, analyzed, and used as evidence of the conspiracy that threatened American democracy. Dr. Elizabeth Chun entered through the main doors at exactly 7 a.m., moving with the confident stride of someone who believed she controlled the situation. She wore an expensive gray suit that spoke of corporate success, her appearance polished and professional. But Maria could see the subtle signs of stress in her former mentor's face. The slight tension around her eyes, the way her hand moved unconsciously to check her phone. "Maria," Chun said, sliding into the pew beside her. "You look well. Different, but well. Hello, Elizabeth. Or should I call you Dr. Sarah Lou now?" Chun's smile was thin but genuine. "You always were perceptive. I've missed working with you." Maria studied her former mentor's face, searching for any trace of the woman who had once been her friend and guide. "Have you? Or did you just miss having a source of intelligence about my activities?" "Both, actually. You were the most brilliant analyst I ever worked with, and also the most idealistic. I hoped that 3 years of hiding would help you understand the realities of the world we live in." "The realities? You mean the reality where government officials conspire with private contractors to attack American citizens?" Chun sighed, the sound echoing softly in the cathedral's vast space. "Maria, you're still thinking in terms of good guys and bad guys, heroes and villains. The world is more complex than that, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. You and your colleagues are planning to kill thousands of people to justify seizing control of American infrastructure. We're planning to save millions of lives by preventing the collapse of American society." Chun's voice carried the fervor of a true believer. "Do you have any idea how vulnerable we are? How easy would it be for our enemies to cripple our power grids, our water systems, our financial networks?" Maria kept her expression neutral, allowing Chun to continue revealing the conspiracy's justifications. So you decided to attack those systems yourself. We decided to demonstrate the vulnerabilities in a controlled manner, with predetermined solutions already in place. Every crisis we've created has been carefully managed to minimize casualties while maximizing awareness of the threats we face. The Texas power grid failure killed 47 people. The Chinese cyber attack that we prevented from happening would have killed thousands. The water contamination in Flint affected 1,200 people. The biological weapons attack we stopped would have affected millions. Maria felt a chill as she realized the depth of Chun's rationalization. You're talking about attacks that never happened, Elizabeth. You're justifying real deaths by preventing imaginary ones. They weren't imaginary. We intercepted communications, analyzed threat assessments, and modeled probable outcomes. The attacks we prevented were as real as the ones we conducted. According to the intelligence that your organization manufactured. Chun's expression hardened. According to intelligence that we gathered through methods that the public would never accept. Maria, you have no idea what we've sacrificed to protect this country. The moral compromises, the personal costs, the weight of making decisions that affect millions of lives. Like the decision to murder my parents. The question hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Chun's face went pale, and for the first time since entering the cathedral, she looked genuinely surprised. Your parents, Chun said quietly. How did you mentioned it in your message. You said you had information about their death, about who was responsible. Chun was silent for a long moment, her gaze moving to the stained glass windows that cast colored light across the stone floor. Your parents discovered something they weren't supposed to know. They were investigating connections between defense contractors and intelligence agencies, following financial trails that led too close to operations that were still classified. They were journalists. They were doing their jobs. They were about to expose a network that had taken 20 years to build, a network that was America's last line of defense against threats that the public couldn't even imagine. Their investigation would have crippled our ability to protect the country. Maria felt the weight of 3 years of grief and anger crystallizing into cold, focused rage. So you had them killed. I authorized their elimination, yes. But Maria, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. You murdered my parents to protect a conspiracy that's designed to destroy American democracy. You manipulated me for years, used my grief to motivate me to work harder, to develop better systems that you could turn into weapons. Chun reached out as if to touch Maria's arm, but stopped when she saw the expression on her former protege's face. Maria, everything we did was to protect you. Your parents' investigation would have exposed your work at DHS, made you a target for foreign intelligence services. We eliminated the threat to keep you safe. And then you framed me for treason when I became inconvenient. We created a controlled situation that would force you to work with us instead of against us. The treason charges were never meant to be permanent. Maria stood up, her movement sudden and decisive. Where is the command center, Elizabeth? Where are you coordinating the attacks from? Chun's expression shifted from conciliatory to calculating. Why would you think I would tell you that? Because you're not going to let me walk away from this conversation. You brought me here to recruit me or eliminate me, and recruiting me means showing me that you have more power than I do. You're right. I'm not going to let you walk away. Chun pressed a button on her phone, and Maria heard the sound of car doors closing outside the cathedral. But I'm also not going to show you our command center. Because you don't trust me. Because I don't need to. Maria, in 3 hours the Eastern Seaboard attack will begin. By tomorrow morning, the President will have declared martial law and granted emergency powers to private contractors who can restore essential services. By next week, Blackwood Industries will control the infrastructure of every major American city. And you think I'm going to help you? I think you're going to realize that fighting us is futile. We have resources you can't imagine, influence you can't counter, and a plan that's already too advanced to stop. Maria's hand moved to the recording device in her jacket, making sure it was still transmitting. What if I told you that I've already identified vulnerabilities in your system? What if I told you that I've been preparing countermeasures for months? Chun laughed, the sound bitter and condescending. Maria, we've been monitoring your activities for the past 6 months. We know about your little cleaning job at the hospital, your careful observations of network security, your amateur attempts at intelligence gathering. You've been playing checkers while we've been playing chess. Have we? Then why are you here trying to recruit me instead of just eliminating me? Because despite everything, I still believe you can be an asset. Your technical skills are exceptional, and your moral certainty, while misguided, makes you incorruptible. Those are valuable qualities in our line of work. Maria heard footsteps approaching from multiple directions, the sound of tactical teams moving into position. How many people did you bring? Enough to ensure that you leave with US voluntarily or involuntarily, your choice. Maria looked around the cathedral, noting the positions of the approaching operatives. 6 men in civilian clothes, moving with military precision, covering all exits. She was trapped, but she had expected this. Elizabeth, I have one more question. Before your people take me into custody, what's that? Do you really believe that what you're doing is right? Do you sleep at night knowing that you're planning to kill thousands of innocent people to justify seizing control of the country? Chun's expression was serious, almost sad. Maria, I sleep at night knowing that I'm preventing the collapse of American civilization. The deaths we cause are a tragedy, but they're a necessary tragedy. The alternative is chaos, societal breakdown, and the eventual conquest of America by foreign powers who don't share our values. Our values? You mean the values that include murdering journalists and framing government employees for treason? I mean the values that include protecting the American people from threats they can't understand or defend against. Sometimes protection requires actions that look like attacks. Sometimes saving lives requires taking lives. Maria stood up, her movement fluid and confident despite the approaching operatives. Elizabeth, you're absolutely right about one thing. I have been playing a different game than you. What do you mean? I mean that while you were monitoring my activities as a hospital cleaner, you missed the fact that I was also monitoring your activities as a cybersecurity consultant. While you were tracking my amateur intelligence gathering, you failed to notice that I was professionally infiltrating your network. Chin's face went pale. That's impossible. Our security protocols are based on systems I helped design. Elizabeth, you recruited me to DHS because I was the best cybersecurity specialist you could find. Did you really think that 3 years of hiding would make me forget everything I learned? Maria pressed a button on her phone and the lights in the cathedral flickered. For the past 6 months, I've been systematically mapping your organization's network infrastructure. Every time you tracked my activities, I tracked yours. Every time you gathered intelligence about my location, I gathered intelligence about your operations. You're bluffing, am I? Then why are the backup power systems in your Northern Virginia facility currently offline? Why are the security cameras in your command center displaying footage from 6 hours ago? Why is your primary communication network routing through servers that I control? Chun's phone buzzed with an urgent message. She read it, her face growing pale. What have you done? I've given you a choice, Elizabeth. You can continue with your plan to attack American infrastructure, but you'll be doing it blind and deaf. Or you can call off the attack and surrender to federal authorities. You can't stop what's already in motion. The attack protocols are automated. Even if you've compromised our communications, the malware is already embedded in the target systems. You're right. I can't stop the attack, but I can turn it against you. Maria pressed another button on her phone, and her voice suddenly echoed through speakers throughout the cathedral. But it wasn't just her voice in the cathedral, it was her voice in the command center. In Blackwood's corporate offices, in the secure facilities where the conspiracy was being coordinated. This is Dr. Maria Santos speaking to all members of the Blackwood conspiracy. You have been infiltrated. Your communications are compromised. Your command structure is under my control. You have 1 hour to surrender to federal authorities before I release evidence of your activities to every major media outlet in the country. Chun grabbed Maria's arm. You don't understand what you're doing. If you expose us, if you destroy our capabilities, the real attacks will begin. The Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, they've all been waiting for an opportunity to strike. Maybe, but that's a problem for legitimate government agencies to handle, not shadow organizations run by defense contractors. The operatives had reached their positions, weapons drawn but not yet aimed. Chun looked around the cathedral, calculating her options. Maria, you're making a mistake that will cost millions of lives. I'm making a choice that will save American democracy. There's a difference. Chun's expression hardened. Take her. But as the operatives moved forward, the cathedral's bells began to ring, their deep tones echoing across the city. It was a signal that Maria had arranged with Morrison's team, an indication that federal law enforcement was approaching the cathedral. Elizabeth, Maria said quietly, I'd like you to meet some friends of mine. The cathedral's main doors burst open, and a team of FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Chun's operatives found themselves surrounded, outgunned, and facing arrest on federal charges. Dr. Elizabeth Chen, the lead agent called out, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy to commit terrorism, and murder. You have the right to remain silent. Chun looked at Maria with a mixture of respect and regret. You always were the best analyst I ever worked with. I learned from the best, Maria replied, before you became a traitor. As the FBI agents led Chun away, Maria's phone rang. It was Morrison. Maria, excellent work. But we have a problem. The automated attack protocols are still active, and we're tracking unusual activity in 17 major cities. The attack is beginning, and we have less than 2 hours to stop it. Maria looked around the cathedral at the stained glass windows that cast colored light across the stone floor, at the altar where truth was supposed to triumph over deception. Then we'd better get to work. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Maria walked toward the cathedral's exit, her mind already racing through the technical challenges that lay ahead. She had captured one of the conspiracy's leaders, but the real battle was just beginning. Somewhere in Northern Virginia, automated systems were preparing to launch an attack that would cripple American infrastructure and justify the implementation of martial law. But Maria Santos was no longer hiding in the shadows. She was no longer invisible, and she was ready to fight. Outside the cathedral, Morrison's team was waiting with a van equipped with mobile command capabilities. As Maria climbed into the vehicle, she realized that her 3 years of hiding were over. Now came the hard part, saving the country from the system she had created to protect it. The van pulled away from the cathedral, heading toward what would either be Maria's greatest triumph or her final failure. Either way, she was done being invisible. The infrastructure war was about to begin, and Maria Santos was ready to fight it on her own terms. The mobile command center racing through the streets of Washington, D.C. was a marvel of technological integration, its interior packed with enough computing power to run a small city. Maria sat before a bank of monitors that displayed real-time data from infrastructure systems across 17 major cities, watching as automated malware began its systematic assault on American civilization. The attack was beautiful in its precision, terrifying in its scope, and utterly relentless in its execution. Boston water treatment facility showing anomalous readings. reported Agent Sarah Kim, one of Morrison's cybersecurity specialists. Chlorine levels are fluctuating outside safe parameters. Chicago power grid experiencing coordinated transformer failures, added Agent Marcus Chun, his fingers flying across multiple keyboards. The cascade is spreading exactly as modeled. Maria's attention was focused on the central display, where a three-dimensional map of the United States showed the attack's progression in real time. Red indicators marked systems under assault, yellow showed systems at risk, and green represented systems still functioning normally. The amount of green was shrinking by the minute. "The malware is more sophisticated than we anticipated," Maria said, her voice tight with concentration. "It's not just attacking individual systems. It's targeting the interdependencies between systems. When the power grid fails in one area, it triggers water treatment problems in another area, which creates transportation bottlenecks in a third area." Morrison, who was coordinating with federal agencies from the Vans Communication Center, looked up from her secure phone. "How long do we have before the failures become irreversible?" "Depends on the system," Maria replied, pulling up detailed schematics on her screen. "Power grids can be restored relatively quickly if we can stop the cascade. Water treatment facilities are more complex. If the biological filters are compromised, it could take weeks to restore safe drinking water. But the real problem is the transportation network." "What about transportation?" "The malware is attacking air traffic control systems, rail switching networks, and urban traffic management simultaneously. If commercial aviation shuts down, if freight rail stops moving, if major highways become impassable due to traffic control failures, the economic impact alone could trigger a recession that lasts for years." Agent Kim's screen suddenly flashed red. "Maria, we're getting reports of a chemical release at the Philadelphia water treatment plant. The automated systems are injecting industrial bleach directly into the drinking water supply." Maria's blood ran cold. "How many people are affected?" "Preliminary estimates suggest 1.2 million people in the greater Philadelphia area. The contamination will reach residential areas within 4 hours." "Can we remotely shut down the injection system?" "Negative. The facility's communication network is offline, and manual override requires physical access to the plant." Maria looked at the clock on her screen. They had been working for 47 minutes, and the situation was deteriorating faster than they could respond. "Morrison, we need to change tactics. We can't fight this system by system. We need to attack the source." "What source?" Chun said the protocols were automated. "They are, but they're being coordinated by a central command algorithm that's monitoring the effectiveness of each attack and adjusting the parameters in real time. If we can find and neutralize the coordination system, the individual attacks will become uncoordinated and much easier to counter." Morrison moved to Maria's workstation. "Where is this coordination system located?" "That's the problem. It's not in any single location. The algorithm is distributed across multiple servers, constantly moving between different data centers to avoid detection. But there's a pattern to its movements, a signature that I can track if I can access enough of the network." Agent Chun looked up from his console. "Maria, we're getting reports that the New York subway system is experiencing signal failures. Trains are stopping in tunnels, and emergency evacuation procedures are being activated." "How many people?" "Approximately 300,000 passengers are currently underground in the subway system. If the ventilation systems fail, if the emergency lighting goes out, if the communication systems are compromised." Maria didn't need him to finish. 300,000 people trapped in underground tunnels without adequate life support would create a humanitarian crisis that would make the hospital attack look trivial. "I need access to the NSA's quantum computing array," Maria said suddenly. "The coordination algorithm is using quantum encryption, which means it can only be cracked by quantum computers." Morrison's face went pale. Maria, accessing NASA systems. Without authorization is exactly what I did 3 years ago when I discovered Project Nightfall. Morrison, we're past the point of following protocol. In 90 minutes, millions of people are going to be without safe drinking water, reliable power, or functioning transportation. The economic damage alone will be measured in hundreds of billions of dollars. And if we get caught accessing classified systems, then we'll be arrested for treason while sitting in a country that's collapsing around us. Morrison was silent. For a moment, weighing the risks. How long would you need? 20 minutes to break the encryption, another 20 to map the algorithm structure, and maybe 10 minutes to implement countermeasures. 50 minutes total. We don't have 50 minutes. Maria looked at the map again, watching as more systems turned red. Then we work faster. Agent Kim's voice cut through the tension. Maria, we have a bigger problem. The malware just activated dormant code in the nuclear power plant cooling systems. Temperatures are rising at 3 facilities, and the automated safety systems are being overridden. The van fell silent. Nuclear power plants were designed with multiple redundant safety systems, specifically to prevent this kind of scenario. If the cooling systems failed, if the automated safety protocols were compromised, they were looking at potential meltdown scenarios that would make Chernobyl look like a minor incident. Which facilities? Maria asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Peach Bottom in Pennsylvania, Calvert Cliffs in Maryland, and North Anna in Virginia. All 3 are within 200 miles of major population centers. Maria closed her eyes, calculating the implications. If even one of those plants experiences a cooling system failure, the evacuation zones will affect 15 million people. The economic impact will be incalculable, and the political consequences will justify any level of emergency response. Including martial law, Morrison said grimly. Including the suspension of constitutional government and the transfer of emergency powers to private contractors, who can allegedly restore order. Agent Chun looked up from his console. Maria, I'm tracking unusual activity in the stock market. Someone is making massive short positions against infrastructure companies and long positions in private security firms. Blackwood Industries? Blackwood and at least 12 other companies. They're positioning themselves to profit from the chaos they're creating. Maria felt a surge of anger that crystallized into cold determination. They're not just attacking our infrastructure, they're betting against America itself. Her fingers began moving across the keyboard with renewed purpose. Morrison, I'm going to need you to contact someone at the NSA. I need access to their quantum array, and I need it now. Maria, even if I could authorize that access, the security protocols alone would take hours to implement. Then we don't go through official channels. Maria pulled up a different screen, showing network architecture that looked suspiciously familiar. 3 years ago, when I was forced to disappear, I created a backdoor into several government systems. I told myself it was for emergency use only. This qualifies as an emergency, Morrison said. Yes, but using it will confirm every accusation that's been made against me. It will prove that I'm exactly the kind of security threat that Chun and her people claimed I was. Agent Kim's screen flashed red again. Maria, the cooling system at Peach Bottom is showing critical temperature readings. We're approaching the point where automatic shutdown procedures should activate. Should I activate it? The malware is blocking the shutdown commands. The plant is heating up, and the safety systems are being overridden. Maria looked at the clock. They had been working for 73 minutes, and the situation was spiraling beyond their ability to control. Morrison, I need you to make a decision. Either we break into NSA systems and stop this attack, or we accept that millions of people are going to suffer because we were too concerned about following protocol. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Do it. Maria's fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing systems that she had sworn never to touch again. The NSA's quantum computing array was a marvel of technology, capable of processing calculations that would take conventional computers centuries to complete. But it was also one of the most heavily defended systems in the world, protected by layers of encryption and security protocols that would have stopped any normal intrusion attempt. Maria wasn't making a normal intrusion attempt. "I'm in," she sighed, her voice carrying a mixture of satisfaction and dread. Accessing the quantum array now. The processing power was intoxicating. Maria could feel the quantum computers working through the encryption that protected the coordination algorithm, breaking down barriers that had seemed impenetrable just minutes before. The algorithm structure began to reveal itself, its logic, becoming clear as the quantum processors mapped its decision trees and command pathways. "Got it," Maria said, triumph creeping into her voice. "The coordination algorithm is beautiful, but it has a fatal flaw. It's designed to be adaptive, to learn from its environment and modify its attacks accordingly. But that adaptability requires constant communication with monitoring systems that are tracking the effectiveness of each attack. So if we can feed it false information about the effectiveness of the attacks, we can trick it into modifying its approach in ways that make it less effective." Agent Chun looked up from his console. "How do we feed it false information? We don't. We turn its own monitoring systems against it." Maria's fingers were moving across the keyboard at superhuman speed, implementing countermeasures that would have taken a team of specialists hours to develop. "The algorithm is monitoring social media, news reports, emergency services communications, and government response protocols to gauge the effectiveness of its attacks. If we can manipulate those information sources, we can manipulate the algorithm. You want to wage an information war against an AI system? I want to lie to it so effectively that it defeats itself." Maria activated a series of programs that began flooding the information channels with false data. Social media posts suggesting that the infrastructure attacks were being easily countered. News reports indicating that backup systems were functioning normally. Emergency services communications implying that the situation was under control. "Will it work?" Morrison asked. "It's already working." Maria pointed to the central display, where several red indicators had shifted to yellow. "The algorithm is detecting what it thinks is effective resistance to its attacks, so it's shifting resources to different targets. But the new targets are ones that we've prepared countermeasures for." Agent Kim's voice carried hope for the first time in hours. "Maria, the Philadelphia water treatment plant is showing normal chlorine levels. The injection system has been shut down. The New York subway system is reporting that signal failures are being resolved," Agent Chun added. "Trains are beginning to move again." Maria allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before focusing on the nuclear power plants. "What's the status of the cooling systems?" "Temperature readings are stabilizing at Peach Bottom and Calvert Cliffs, but North Anna is still showing elevated temperatures. That's because it's the primary target. The other attacks were designed to create chaos and confusion, but North Anna is where they want to create a genuine crisis that justifies emergency powers." Maria accessed the North Anna facility's control systems directly, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she worked to override the malware's control of the cooling systems. The plant's nuclear reactor was a complex machine that generated tremendous amounts of heat that had to be constantly removed by circulating coolant through the reactor core. If the cooling systems failed, the reactor would overheat, potentially causing a meltdown that would release radiation across hundreds of square miles. "The malware is more sophisticated at this facility," Maria said, her voice tight with concentration. "It's using quantum encryption to protect its control of the cooling systems. I can break the encryption, but it will take time." "How much time?" "More time than we have. The reactor temperature is approaching critical levels." Agent Kim looked up from her console. Maria, we're getting reports that evacuation procedures are being activated around the North Anna facility. The governor of Virginia is considering declaring a state of emergency, which is exactly what Blackwood wants. The evacuation will create chaos. The state of emergency will justify federal intervention, and the federal intervention will be coordinated by private contractors who are already positioned to profit from the crisis. Maria made a decision that would either save thousands of lives or destroy her own. Morrison, I'm going to need you to patch me directly into the North Anna facility's communication system. I need to talk to the plant's chief engineer. Maria, that will reveal your location to anyone monitoring the facility's communications. Yes, it will, but it will also give me access to someone who knows the plant's systems better than any computer algorithm. Morrison activated the communication link, and Maria found herself speaking to Chief Engineer Robert Martinez, a man whose voice carried the strain of someone dealing with a crisis that threatened everything he had spent his career protecting. Dr. Santos, I've heard about your work. Can you help us regain control of our cooling systems? I can, but I need you to help me. The malware is using quantum encryption to protect its control of your systems. I can break the encryption, but I need you to simultaneously implement manual overrides that will confuse the algorithm's monitoring systems. What kind of manual overrides? I need you to physically disconnect the automated cooling controls and switch to manual operation. The algorithm is monitoring digital control systems, but it can't track manual interventions that don't generate digital signatures. Maria could hear Martinez moving through the facility, his footsteps echoing. In the plant's control room. Dr. Santos, I'm at the manual override panel. What do you need me to do? On my count, I need you to disconnect the automated systems and switch to manual control. I'll be breaking the encryption at the same time, which should create a window where the malware loses control of the cooling systems. Understood. Ready when you are. Maria's fingers poised over the keyboard, the quantum computers processing the final layers of encryption that protected the malware's control systems. 3.2.1. Now, the North Anna facility's cooling systems roared to life as Martinez activated the manual controls, while Maria's countermeasures simultaneously broke the malware's encryption and severed its connection to the plant's automated systems. The reactor temperature began to drop immediately, the crisis averted by the combination of human expertise and technological superiority. Temperature is stabilizing, Martinez reported, relief evident in his voice. We have regained control of the cooling systems. Maria slumped back in her chair, exhaustion washing over her. Morrison, what's the status on the other systems? Power grids are stabilizing. Water treatment facilities are returning to normal operation and transportation. Networks are beginning to function again. The coordinated attack is falling apart. Agent Chun looked up from his console. Maria, we're tracking massive financial losses for the companies that were betting against American infrastructure. Blackwood Industries alone has lost an estimated $12 billion in the past hour. Good. Let them explain those losses to their investors. Maria's phone buzzed with an encrypted message from an unknown sender. Impressive work, Dr. Santos, but you've only won the first battle. The war is far from over. We have resources you haven't imagined, and we're already planning our next move. Enjoy your victory while it lasts. Maria showed the message to Morrison, who read it with a grim expression. It's not over. No, Maria agreed. But we've proven that they can be beaten. We've shown that their systems can be countered, their algorithms can be defeated, and their conspiracy can be exposed. Agent Kim's voice cut through their conversation. Maria, we're getting reports that Dr. Marcus Blackwood has been arrested at his corporate headquarters. FBI agents are executing search warrants at 17 different locations connected to his organization. Maria smiled for the first time in hours. Then maybe it is over. Maybe we've actually won. But even as she spoke, she knew that victory was temporary. The conspiracy had been disrupted, but not destroyed. The infrastructure had been saved, but not secured. And somewhere in the shadows, other enemies were already planning their next attack. Maria looked at the monitors showing the stabilizing infrastructure across 17 major cities, at the green indicators that represented millions of lives saved, at the evidence of a conspiracy that had been defeated by the combination of human courage and technological expertise. She had spent 3 years hiding in the shadows, invisible and ignored. Now she was ready to step into the light and help build the defenses that would protect American democracy from future attacks. The race against time was over. The longer war for America's future was just beginning. 3 weeks after the infrastructure crisis, as the media had dubbed it, Maria stood in the witness chair of a closed Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, facing the most powerful legislators in America. The room's marble columns and ornate ceiling spoke of democratic tradition, but the tension in the air suggested that American democracy had been tested in ways that few people fully understood. Senator Patricia Williams, the committee chairwoman, leaned forward with an expression that mixed respect with barely concealed frustration. "Dr. Santos, you've testified that you used unauthorized access to NSA quantum computing systems to stop the coordinated attack on American infrastructure. Are you asking this committee to believe that breaking federal law was justified?" Maria looked directly at the senator, her voice steady and clear. "Senator, I'm asking this committee to recognize that sometimes protecting the law requires breaking it. The choice wasn't between legal and illegal action. It was between effective and ineffective action." "But Dr. Santos," interrupted Senator Michael Chun, "your actions validate every concern that intelligence agencies have about rogue operators. How do we maintain security if specialists decide for themselves which laws to follow?" "Senator, with respect, that question assumes that the intelligence agencies were capable of stopping the attack through legal channels. They weren't. The conspiracy reached into the highest levels of government, including members of this committee's oversight responsibilities." The room fell silent. Maria had just accused sitting senators of being compromised by the same conspiracy she had helped expose. Senator Williams consulted her notes. "Dr. Santos, are you referring to the financial connections between Blackwood Industries and various congressional campaigns?" "I'm referring to the fact that Blackwood Industries donated $12 million to political campaigns over the past 4 years, with the explicit understanding that recipients would support legislation favorable to private infrastructure management. Some of that money went to members of this committee." The silence deepened. Senator Williams looked at her colleagues, several of whom were studying their papers with unusual intensity. "The financial connections," Maria continued, "were just one aspect of a broader influence operation. Blackwood's organization recruited government officials, manipulated intelligence assessments, and created artificial crises to justify the transfer of public infrastructure to private control. And you have evidence of this?" "I have terabytes of evidence. Financial records, communications intercepts, technical documentation, and recorded conversations that detail the entire conspiracy. The question isn't whether the conspiracy existed, it's whether Congress has the courage to act on the evidence." Senator Williams activated a secure tablet and spent several minutes reviewing classified documents. "Dr. Santos, according to these files, your investigation prevented attacks that could have killed thousands of people and caused hundreds of billions in economic damage." "Yes, Senator. And according to these same files, you accomplished this while living under an assumed identity as a hospital janitor, working entirely outside official channels." "That's correct." "Dr. Santos, help me understand something. You had a brilliant career with the Department of Homeland Security. You were developing cutting-edge defensive systems. Why did you choose to disappear instead of working within the system to address your concerns? Maria was quiet for a moment, considering how to explain 3 years of hiding. 3 years of watching from the shadows as her own creation was turned into a weapon. Senator, I tried to work within the system. When I discovered that Project Nightfall was being weaponized, I reported it through proper channels. I filed formal complaints, requested investigations, and provided evidence to multiple supervisors. The response was to frame me for treason and force me to disappear. And during those 3 years of hiding, you were gathering evidence? I was surviving. But yes, I was also gathering evidence. I knew that eventually, the conspiracy would attempt something so large that it couldn't be hidden. The infrastructure crisis was that attempt. Senator Chun leaned forward. Dr. Santos, you've described the conspiracy that penetrated multiple government agencies, influenced congressional legislation, and nearly succeeded in seizing control of American infrastructure. If the conspiracy was that sophisticated, how did you manage to stop it? Maria smiled grimly. Senator, they made the same mistake that most powerful people make. They underestimated someone they considered powerless. To them, I was just a janitor, invisible and irrelevant. They never imagined that the woman mopping their floors was the same person who had designed the systems they were trying to exploit. But you were more than just the original designer. You were actively working to counter their operations. Yes, for 18 months, I used my position at Metropolitan General Hospital to study their network architecture, map their communication protocols, and identify vulnerabilities in their systems. Every night while I cleaned their facilities, I was also infiltrating their networks. Senator Williams consulted another document. Dr. Santos, we've reviewed your personnel file from DHS. Your psychological evaluation describes you as someone with an unusually strong moral compass, and an NKUation describes you as someone with an unusually strong moral compass. Almost obsessive commitment to protecting innocent people. Is that accurate? I don't know about obsessive, Senator. But yes, I believe that protecting innocent people is more important than following orders or maintaining institutional loyalty, even if it means breaking the law. Senator, when the law is being used to protect criminals and punish heroes, then the law has lost its moral authority. My oath was to protect and defend the Constitution, not to protect and defend the people who were violating it. The committee room was quiet except for the soft hum of air conditioning and the distant sound of Washington traffic. Maria realized that she was at a crossroads, not just in her own life, but in the broader question of how America would respond to the reality of modern threats. Dr. Santos, Senator Williams said finally, what do you think should happen next? How do we prevent future conspiracies like this one? Maria had been thinking about this question for weeks. Senator, we need to fundamentally change how we think about cybersecurity and infrastructure protection. The old model of government agencies defending against external threats is obsolete. Modern threats come from inside our own systems, from people who understand our vulnerabilities better than we do. What do you propose? I propose the creation of an independent cybersecurity agency, staffed by specialists who report directly to Congress rather than to executive branch officials who might be compromised. This agency would have the authority to investigate threats from any source, including government agencies and private contractors. Senator Chen looked skeptical. Dr. Santos, that sounds like a recipe for chaos. How do we maintain security if multiple agencies are investigating each other? Senator, the chaos is already here. The conspiracy we just exposed operated for years inside government agencies that were supposed to be secure. The question isn't how to prevent investigation. It's how to ensure that investigation is effective. And you think this independent agency would be effective? I think it would be accountable. The current system allows conspiracies to develop because the people responsible for preventing them are often the same people who might benefit from them. An independent agency would have no institutional loyalties except to the truth. Senator Williams made notes on her tablet. Dr. Santos, would you be willing to help establish such an agency? Senator, I've spent 3 years hiding from my own government. I'm not sure I'm the right person to help create a new government agency. But you're exactly the right person. You understand the technical aspects of modern threats. You've demonstrated the courage to act when institutions fail, and you've proven that you can't be bought or intimidated. Maria considered the offer. A chance to return to legitimate government. Service to use her skills in official channels, to help build the defenses that America needed in the modern world. Senator, I would need certain assurances. I would need protection from retaliation, authority to investigate any threat regardless of its source, and the resources to attract the best cybersecurity specialists in the country. And in return? In return, I would help build a cybersecurity capability that could prevent future conspiracies from threatening American democracy. Senator Williams looked at her colleagues, reading their expressions. Dr. Santos, this committee will be making recommendations to Congress about how to respond to the infrastructure crisis. Your proposal for an independent cybersecurity agency will be part of those recommendations. Thank you, Senator. But Dr. Santos, I need you to understand something. The conspiracy you exposed had powerful allies, people who profited from the arrangement between government agencies and private contractors. Creating an independent agency will make you enemies in places you haven't imagined. Maria thought about the past 3 years, about the loneliness of hiding, about the constant fear of discovery, about the weight of carrying secrets that could save or destroy lives. Senator, I've been making enemies for 3 years. At least. Now I'll be making them for a good cause. The hearing concluded with a promise of continued consultation and the possibility of future collaboration. As Maria left the Capitol building, she realized that her life as Dr. Maria Santos, the hospital janitor, was officially over. The question now was what kind of life Dr. Maria Santos, the cybersecurity specialist, would build. Her phone buzzed with a text from Morrison. Saw the news coverage of your testimony. Interested in a consulting position with the Prometheus Group? We're expanding our operations, and we could use someone with your skills. Maria smiled as she read the message. The Prometheus Group had evolved from a small band of former government analysts into a legitimate intelligence consultancy, working with Congress and federal agencies to identify and counter threats to American democracy. She typed back, interested, but I have conditions. Name them. First, we work exclusively for Congress and congressional oversight committees. No executive branch contracts, no private sector work that might create conflicts of interest. Second, we focus specifically on internal threats, conspiracies, that develop within government agencies and private contractors. Third, we maintain complete transparency about our operations and funding. Agreed. When can you start? Maria looked back at the Capitol building, where legislators were debating the future of American cybersecurity policy, based partly on her testimony. I already have. 6 months later, Maria stood in the main floor of the newly established Congressional Cybersecurity Research Center, a facility that looked remarkably similar to the Prometheus Group's warehouse but with official government funding and congressional oversight. The center employed 47 specialists, all of them former government analysts who had become uncomfortable with the direction their agencies were taking. Dr. Santos called Agent Kim, who had joined the center after completing her FBI service. We're tracking unusual activity in the financial networks. It looks like someone is trying to manipulate currency exchange rates. Foreign or domestic? Domestic. The activity is originating from servers registered to defense contractors. But the pattern suggests coordination with foreign intelligence services. Maria walked to Kim's workstation, studying the data patterns that indicated another conspiracy was developing. How long have they been active? At least 6 months, maybe longer. They've been very careful to hide their activities. Not careful enough. Maria activated her secure communication system. Morrison, we have a situation. I'm sending you data on a new conspiracy involving defense contractors and foreign intelligence services. Morrison's voice came through the encrypted channel clearly. Understood. How do you want to proceed? The same way we always proceed. We gather evidence, we expose the truth, and we protect innocent people from those who would exploit them. Maria looked around the center at the analysts who had chosen to work outside traditional government channels, who had sacrificed conventional careers to help protect American democracy from its enemies, both foreign and domestic. Kim, I want you to map the full extent of the financial manipulation. Chun, I want you to identify the foreign connections. Rodriguez, I want you to track the communication patterns between the domestic and foreign operators. What about you? Kim asked. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to find the vulnerabilities in their system and exploit them. Maria sat down at her workstation, her fingers moving across the keyboard with the fluid precision that had made her famous in certain circles. The screen filled with network diagrams, financial data, and communication intercepts that told the story of another conspiracy against American democracy. But this time, she wasn't working alone. This time, she had resources, authority, and the backing of Congress. This time, she wasn't a janitor hiding in the shadows. She was a cybersecurity specialist with the power to act. Her phone buzzed with a message from an unknown sender. Dr. Santos, you've made more enemies than you know. Your new agency won't protect you from what's coming. Maria read the message, deleted it, and returned to her work. She had spent 3 years hiding from threats, living in fear, wondering if each day would be her last. Now she was ready to face whatever came next. The infrastructure crisis had been just the beginning. The real war for America's future was being fought in the shadows, in the networks and systems that most people never saw, but that controlled every aspect of modern life. Maria Santos was no longer invisible. She was no longer hiding, and she was ready to fight. Outside the center's windows, Washington, D.C. hummed with the daily business of democracy. Traffic moved smoothly through streets managed by computerized control systems. Water flowed safely through pipes monitored by automated sensors. Power grids distributed electricity through networks protected by advanced cybersecurity protocols. It looked like a normal day in America. But Maria knew that beneath the surface, in the hidden networks and secret systems that kept civilization functioning, the battle for the future was just beginning. She had spent 3 years as a janitor, invisible and ignored. Now she was ready to spend the rest of her life as a guardian, protecting the systems that protected everyone else. The night shift was over. The day shift was just beginning. And Maria Santos was ready for whatever came next. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.